Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. What an honor it is to be in San Bruno, California, with a legendary multi-instrumentalist, Alex Jordan. Welcome to the program.
How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's beautiful. I wanted to start by asking you a question. I know that you came out of the academy. I mean, your education in music was in the academy, but can you talk about, on the bandstand, how to build musical vocabulary? I mean, it seems like that's an essential part of music, and I don't think you can learn that in academia.
Well, I mean, academia has its own language for its musical vocabulary, and it's an agreed upon language that has evolved over hundreds of years of trying to educate people in the sort of academic classical approach, if you will, to things. But I think what happens in the the rock and roll, the performance world is that given whatever your environment, a similar thing happens. It's just it's not normalized over hundreds of years. It's just sort of normalized over whatever works the best in a given situation. And talking about phrasing, talking about musical cues and dynamics and all that kind of stuff. Everyone has their own language. There was a term that was presented to me when I first started playing in the Terrapin world. There was GBUs, garage band units, which I guess is comes down from Phil's
GBUs. I love that.
Yeah,
what is it?
right.
Break that down for the lay person out there.
It's real simple. It's just it's a phrase. It's the natural inclination of what the phrase is. So like something might be 4 GBUs long. It's the phrase is 4. It's four of whatever the natural thing is.
Right.
And it's a garage band unit. It's not a particular. You're not saying 4 8-bar phrases. You're just saying 4 GBUs, 4 of whatever the natural. The feel of the phrasing is and whatnot.
I mean, can you talk from a perspective of Midnight North, how you guys are trying to grow musical vocabulary? Because you guys are, especially since you've joined the band.
Right. Well, I hope at this point we sort of have a musical vocabulary in terms of talking about music, but also in terms of playing it. Just because I joined the band a little over 4.25 years ago, something like that.
Right.
And the process, taking time within the process to develop some sort of a complex way of discussing something, you don't have the luxury of it. I guess what I'm saying.
Exactly.
So
it's nonverbal.
No, exactly. So on stage, there was a time where Graham might be doing something musical, or Elliot might be stretching out a phrase on stage vocally, and we're all kind of glued to them, wondering, okay, what are they going to do? What's going to happen right now? And that happens less and less as time goes on. Graham will be doing something on the guitar, and I'll go, oh, well, okay, in 2 GBUs, or on the end of the next GBU, he's going to land right here.
And that's just from being
playing together.
Exactly.
Yeah,
on the bandstand.
And so that sort of that evolves, and it evolves principally by playing together a lot. And we probably played 75 or 85 shows last year, and the equal number the year before, and the year before, and the year before, and that's in addition to all the other stuff we do.
Absolutely. No, you got. This is the crux of it is like Graham is a baseball fanatic, and he looks
Sure.
at like. You got utility infielders, you got people to play roles. Mm-hmm. My question is, how did you meet the cats in the band, and how, what role are you? I mean, are you the third baseman? Are you a utility player? I mean, because listen, you learned
right.
Well, when I interviewed Graham, the first interview, he was like, Alex, on his own whim, decided to learn the B3.
Yeah.
So you're still your tentacles are all out there,
Yeah.
So what's your role in your mind, if you even have one?
I'm sort of the utility player.
Absolutely valuable. I mean,
this tour. Imagine if you had you had a baseball team, but you only had eight players.
Right.
And so that's sort of like, we all kind of have to have that aspect of where we're able to do an additional thing. Because Connor's frequently put in the situation when Phil sits in with us that he is either is faced with having to leave the stage or play another instrument, and so he plays mandolin and he has baritone guitars, and he has all these other things that he can do, especially when we're doing things like the band material, where he can just bust out the mandolin and be the mandolin player.
Like King Harvest, or what kind of tunes?
Well, the one that comes to mind is like Atlantic City.
Right.
He nails the beginning of Atlantic City. He just pulls out the mandolin and.
It's a Bruce Springsteen tune.
That's yeah. With the band.
No, hold on.
Covers,
So what you're saying is that, because we were talking off air about the getting the bass player additional to fill, but
we do that too, though.
You double bass,
and then he has to be flexible in that he has to be able to go, okay, well, now I've got this guy occupying a similar sonic register but doing a completely different thing, and so he's conscious of that, and so I guess circling back, we're all sort of have to be the ninth man at any given time.
Well, and I mean, you clearly came in, and do you remember like the initial just sort of conversations that you had about why you were a fit for the band? Because obviously it's evolved.
Right. So yeah, initially, so I met them in actually Los Angeles. I was playing with a band in LA called Cubensis, and it's a Dead tribute band. And I was doing that. I was actually on their road crew, and I was just subbing for them.
Right.
And so Midnight North came down. They hadn't settled on the name Midnight North yet, so they were going by Graham Lush and Friends. And there was just a 4-piece. It was Connor, Elliot, Graham, and our first drummer Eric. And they had their new material, and their record was just about to come out. The first record was End of the Night, and they, as nights go, you try to watch the other band, but you've got other, all these other things you're handling. So finally, the second night, we did 2 nights, and the second night I got a chance to sit down, and I talked to them briefly the night before, but just to stand kind of off to the side and not worry about setting anything up or talking to anybody and watch their set. And there were a couple tunes that really grabbed me, but I felt like, oh man, these are really begging for a third part harmony. And when the
vocal harmony,
yeah. And when the record came out, I right after that, I visited Terrapin, and Graham was gracious enough to invite me to sit in on one of the nights with the Terrapin All Stars at the time.
So you made connection with them in LA, and then they said, right, come up when you're up in the Bay, come up and hang.
Yeah, come up and hang. Yeah, exactly. And so Graham gave me a copy of the record, and there were third part vocals all over it, but they only had the 2 singers. And so I sort of bugged Elliot about it the next time we all ran into each other, which was in October. I did another just to sit in with them, and I said, hey, you guys have all these third part harmonies, and I had on the drive up was listening to the record because I wanted to make sure I knew the songs, and as you're studying, you just sort of they're really naturally good melodies and naturally obvious and easy harmonies.
Absolutely.
For at least for my register. So I just learned a couple of them just offhand, and I got on stage and sang a couple of them with them, and it was fun. We had a good laugh, and Elliot sort of joked at the end of that whole interaction, so, have you ever thought about moving to San Francisco? And probably not knowing that I was from the Bay Area, and I was just like, sure, yeah. And so over the next couple months, we sort of were in touch about it, and I did a trial little run of shows, and it just sort of fit. And I guess what they were looking for was a third singer. And Graham was the only lead instrument. He was
right. Ellie was playing rhythm
guitar, and actually she was playing a lot of keyboard too.
That's right.
And Connor was covering a lot of ground with the bass, and as a 4-piece, they were able to experiment with more, and they were still, getting what became our sound. They're still searching for that and finding it. I mean, you can only be. It takes.
It's timeless.
Years,
it's endless.
Right?
Endless.
We're still going. It's like we don't know.
But then did you get off? I mean, when you started to play the B3, mm-hmm. who were you listening to horn players?
Well, that was the funny thing. So I joined the band as a guitar player,
right,
and didn't play any keyboard. And I had some keyboards at home that I was goofing around on, but I didn't. It wasn't like I was going home every day and woodshedding stuff and practicing. And I was a jazzer a long time before I got into rock and roll, because I was a trombone player all the way up until college.
Wow, like Crusaders kind of jazz, or like what kind of like bebop? Or?
I like bebop. I couldn't play bebop, but I like listening to bebop. I loved anything Miles Davis did,
so you already had that pedigree, though.
Right. I mean, I studied that in high school and was in jazz band and everything. I almost went to school for jazz trombone, but I decided to go for voice instead because I wanted to, and I ended up being an education major and all that kind of stuff. So, but through all that was just sort of exposed to the B3 as just an instrument. I thought it was a cool instrument. I remember seeing a Robin Ford show at Yoshi's in like 2007, I think.
Right. He had a B3 with him?
He had a B3 player.
Wow.
That came out that night, and I probably went to watch Robin Ford, and I don't really remember much of what he played.
It's always the way that works. Because you were obsessed with the B3.
Yeah, we were kind of. It was this. I'd never seen one in person, and the guy playing it was just grooving, and it was covering so much. There wasn't a rhythm guitar player, right? So it was covering anything that wasn't the guitar, and there was a bass player that night, but it was just covering so much ground. And he would change the tone, and it would, and I didn't know anything about B3s or Leslies or anything at the time, but that stuck with me. And so when I would listen to jazz, if a chart with a B3 came on or something like that, it would sort of catch my ear. But so I had an M, which is like a real small, compact, poor man's B3, if you will, and I was goofing around on that, but I hadn't really gotten into it as an instrument yet. But lo and behold, there was just a rehearsal. We had a Nord keyboard, an Nord Electro 2, and I think Graham was like late to rehearsal or something like that, and so I just sat down and started goofing around on this Nord, and Connor, and if you ever meet Connor, he's got a very direct personality. Sometimes he goes, "You're playing that on Sunday," and I go, "I'm not playing fucking keyboard on Sunday." I'm not a keyboard player.
Wow.
He goes, "No, you're playing it." So we played. There's one tune, Miss M, which
you wanted to demonstrate.
Elliot's guitar part of Miss M is that, just kind of that thing, and Connor has a bass line that's. That kind of thing, and Graham is already finding where he's fitting in there. I don't know what he was doing at the time, and so there wasn't really room for a third guitar. So the natural fit was
there was no room for a third guitar.
Not in all that, but I was doing it because that's what I was brought on to do, and so eventually this is fantastic. The organ kind of got in there because of that rehearsal, and I just started so. And that kind of changed our sound a little bit, I think, in retrospect, because that was an instrument that we didn't have at all. Elliot would play piano. She would play Wurlitzer sounds and piano sounds and things, but the B3 is a totally different texture.
The cats are losing their minds. They would. You had this guitar. Can you play something off that? Play an original Alex Jordan tune and what that. Talk to the audience about what that guitar is all about.
This is a 1958 018. It's a Martin. It has had quite a life.
How did you acquire that?
So I work at a guitar shop when I'm off the road.
You repair B3s too, right?
I repair B3s.
Well, you repair yours, but
I've worked on other people's B3s. I hope I've done more good than harm. I'm just totally into guitars and I've built a couple, and so I've naturally ended up at this really great repair and retail shop in Palo Alto called Griffin Stringed Instruments. But things like this come through, and this thing's so beat up, and like the finish is coming off, like the word Martin's about to come off the headstock, and so we said we really can't do a whole lot with it. So we had to price it kind of reasonably, and I just said, you know what?
I'm gonna grab it.
I'm gonna grab it because it's so cool.
Alex Jordan on the Jake Feinberg show. Go ahead, buddy.
Okay. So you wanna be a hero, wear a crown upon your head, fame and fortune, splendor, and your California king bed. No need to explain how good it's been for you. Your kingdom comes with a view, and every bar you go to serve your favorite beer. Always pick the winner in each election year. You're the paragon of perfect, that much we always knew. Your kingdom comes with a view, and I can hardly wait for the fall when this story's through. Tear your picture down from the wall. Your kingdom comes with a view. magazine. Your good deeds overflowing, your reputation is too clean. Well, give us all a minute, find dirty laundry too. Your kingdom comes with a view, and I can hardly wait for the fall, when this story's through. Tear your picture down from the wall, your kingdom comes with a view. Favorite teacher told me that life is seldom fair. Well, the scale's in your favor, I'd say you've had your share. Well, the people like their heroes, and they vilify a few. Your kingdom comes with a view. And my, oh my, what they say about you now. Tell me, is it true? What's the dirt, the where, and the how? Your kingdom comes with a view. And I can hardly wait for the fall, when this story's through. Tear your picture down from the wall, your kingdom comes with a view. Your kingdom comes with a view. Your kingdom comes with a view. Oh, your kingdom comes with a view.
Mesmerizing, Alex Jordan. People keep the comments coming in. A lot of people are just discovering this cat. He's burning. We were talking off air about. I want you to talk to cats around the country and the world about this this bag of tunes that you guys have at Terrapin,
Right.
and that you're okay with it being a little bit loose and free, and
Right.
that you go to the Gulf Coast maybe, and those cats are totally cool to hit it. But there's a lot of people that even if they're not familiar with the tune, they're not into it.
Well,
and
yeah.
talk about first
Yeah.
talk about the idea of being able to develop a bag of tunes as a community, and then also being comfortable just letting it all out.
Right. So I mean, it's not. I wouldn't say that there's nobody, around the country besides around here. In the
I don't want to. I don't want to paint with a
Right.
broad brush.
But I would say that there's a culture that we've sort of. I don't want to take too much credit for it. 'Cause I think it's been
Well, there's like 40 of you, right? I mean, they got
there's probably like 30 or 40 of us that regularly play at Terrapin Crossroads. And there's, on top of that, however many, let's just say another 40 or 50 that come through,
Absolutely.
in various things. And some people are playing with, Phil, like guys like Stanley Jordan, he's not, well, I'm sure he's played in the bar, but he's not getting booked for a Terrapin All-Star gig in the bar,
Schofield or people like that.
Right, but the same thing for the great room and for the bar, that the same culture prevails, which is this sort of fearlessness.
Yes.
To do tunes you don't do normally, and try tunes that you haven't done before.
Is that something that before, I don't want to lose track, but I mean, is that from Graham, or does that stem from Phil?
Well, gosh.
Because Phil's always the one that's like, I mean, I've talked to Leone about Phil. Anybody, he's always the most prepared, and he's pushing the envelope.
I think it comes from Phil because I mean, if you think about the Phil and Friends shows, the concept with all the Phil and Friends stuff over the years has been to bring all these different musicians together. And I've only known Phil for 4.5 or so years, and I don't think that I don't think he's had some major change between 20 years ago and now. It's like I think
absolutely not.
That philosophy is sort of probably
actually, it doesn't even matter to attribute. But I want you to talk about that. Is it a non-verbal thing to push the envelope with you guys? Like, I mean, when you know that you're trying to stretch.
Within music or within
well, I'm talking about like when you talk about always trying to drive the song,
sure,
and push the envelope. I mean, how does that trail down? How did that get into osmosis to get into you?
Well, that's a cultural, sort of a systemic disease, if you will. The Dead were probably to a fault, willing to try things and push the envelope, to the point that a perfectly good, polished, excellent, marketable, tangible, enjoyable product would just totally get foobarred, man. It's just like, because they
wanted nothing to do with it.
Right, because they would have something. It's like, man, we nailed that. Now let's change it. They were just always trying to do that. And I think that culture, through Phil and into the Terrapin community, sort of prevails. And so we're not up there sitting. It's not like the Dead, because we're not the same band every night within the not speaking of Midnight North, with talking about just the Terrapin, the All Stars aspect of the Terrapin Crossroads, and it's a different. You might play with 4 of 5 of the same people, and you've got one person is different in that band than, say, 6 months ago when the other 4 of you were in the same thing. And in my position too, I'm playing keyboard with the same 4 people that I may have played guitar with before, and so so the perspective on that is that you're just sort of always looking at tunes. You try to always look at tunes like it's a fresh thing, because it's a different band all the time, and so within the context of repertoire, there's just over time, probably a lot of which evolved out of what Graham refers to, like the soft opening in the first weekend of shows. He talks about everyone had to quickly learn a bunch of songs, because they were going to do, I don't know how many, crazy number of sets of music within a short time.
When Crossroads first was open.
Right, when they first opened. So it's, there's videos of that stuff too, and I'm not sure they're supposed to be, but there are videos of that, like, where it's, there's like, I think Bob was there, and maybe Larry Campbell, and Ross, and Graham, and his brother Brian, and Phil, and I think Tim Bloom, and just a bunch of different people, and all people that reasonably should be able to play with one another, but probably hadn't regularly played with one another prior to that experience. And so he talks about that having to come up with a bunch of tunes quickly, and I think that just sort of must have just set the tone. And so by the time I came around in summer of 2013, that was in full swing. You'd get there for these All Stars shows, and the All Stars show was a different band all the time, and there was unless there was some sort of theme night, which we hadn't really started doing then, there was no rules. And so someone says, well, I got this Merle tune. It's like, well, I've got this tune by a band you've never heard of, and I've got this Cake song, and I've got this Jason Isbell song, and I've got this, and you would just, and sometimes it was easy, it's a 4-chord song or 3-chord song, and you would figure it out, and other times someone would write a chart out. And I didn't have an iPad, at the time, so you would have to copy your own chart and put it on the, put it on the music stand. But eventually, most of us got iPads, and somewhere along the line, I think Graham, probably slacking off at work, took photos, of over 1,000 charts, and put them onto his iPad, and then shared that with me, and I've shared that with people too, and so as a result, and it's not just. Sometimes it's just lyrics. Sometimes it's just a quick couple notes about a song, and sometimes it's the whole chart written out in extreme detail, and sometimes it's a shorthand of that, and there's an accepted way of looking at charts at Terrapin that is probably within 10% of how someone else might expect to see a chart, and it's legible, it's easy, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and we've just all developed that over the years.
Alex, what is it? What do you think when you run into a cat or a band in Minnesota or Dakota or wherever it is, and they're reticent to dive in? What's holding them from music? As a layperson, I'm not a professional musician, so
right.
What's holding them back?
I think it has to do with tunes that you don't know. Like someone would be totally 100% if especially if we were playing with people in the Dead community, and they said, hey man, we want to do a tune, do you know Eyes of the World? And it's like, yeah I do, no problem. They'll get up there and they'll play Eyes of the World because they're comfortable with that. And if you get up with the tune, I have this distinct memory of the first time I played at Terrapin, and this is a sink or swim kind of situation, right?
First time at Terrapin,
first time. And I have this distinct memory, we had started the night with 2 upbeat country tunes, and I probably didn't tell anybody this, but I'd never played country music in my life. And
there's a lot of firsts going on,
right,
you know?
and that's the whole culture. It's like try things,
do
try
it.
anything. So in that situation, we played these two fast country tunes, and I don't know that I was that I did any wonders on the tunes, because that's the other thing, where everyone's passing it around to take leads. It's not just one person is the lead player for the night. It's not that. And so it's almost like a bluegrass circle in that regard, where it's just everybody's equal, and everybody sings and everyone plays. So we got later in the night, we got to this tune, and it's a Tim Bloom song, and Graham called the tune. It's called Squeaky Wheel, which is one of my absolute favorite songs, and it's a song Midnight North covers a lot, because it's got good harmonies, and it's a great upbeat, train tune. And Darren Ney from the Gramblers was in the audience, and I didn't know who the Gramblers were. I didn't know who Darren Ney was, and I didn't know the song. And so Graham invited Darren to come up, and he handed Darren his guitar, and he just sang the song. And it was a lot of fun, and we get to the solo break, and Graham nods at me, and I don't know what I did, and kind of made through it, and I nod at Darren, it's okay, go. And Darren, just sort of blows, and just shreds through the whole thing, because it's a tune that his band was doing, and he's a great guitar player, and I was like, well, shit, I don't know what I have no recollection of what I just played, but I was like, okay, so now I should probably know how to play this type of music. And I just realized that no one was going to ask you, can you play country music? Can you play this? Do you know this song? No one was going to ask you that. It was just sort of like...
In the deep end, right away.
Right. Here, this is a tune we're doing. Let's go for it.
It's absolutely invigorating.
Enough
stuff.
people knew it on stage to do the tune, And it's totally invigorating. It was inspiring that this group of people not only were fearless to do songs they didn't know, and play genres they weren't always comfortable with, but also were sort of mercilessly encouraging of other people to do the same thing, and there was sort of a no holds barred, sink or swim, okay, it's all fun anyway, kind of an attitude about it, and that was just incredibly inspiring. And that is, I think, what is different. But
people are afraid to make mistakes, to fall on their face. I mean, what I'm saying is, I
think that people
this is something I want. I want it to be 12, 15, 20 city. I mean, to me, I remember talking to Buzzy Featon from the Butterfield Blues Band. He said, if live music is going to be sustained, cats with, for lack of a better term, with some deep pockets are going to have to invest in a club and cultivate a scene.
Well, that culture's already happening.
But
not just in Terrapin, that culture's happening. But to your point, I think that's the thing, that music over the last, prior to let's say 5 or 6 years ago, music went through a 15, 20-year period of just being highly polished and even stale, and to the point where
formula trip.
Yeah, right. And I mean, it's still. Pop music still is. We were talking earlier. There's nothing wrong with a good pop song. But there is an expectation, and it's the reverse of what I think our is doing. We're trying to make something new, and the audience, I think, is there. Even with Midnight North, where we're not explicitly a jam band. The audience is there because they feel, and we feel, at least we're trying, to make every show unique and to make every experience unique. We're not out there attempting to recreate an identical package. And I've seen McCartney a number of times, and there's nothing wrong with Paul McCartney, and there's nothing wrong with his show, and God forbid they insert a 12-minute jam in the middle of I Saw Her Standing There. But
it's a burn after a while when you do the same. I mean, that's what Garcia was talking about with the Who. They did the same show for 4 years straight. It's a burn.
And I think that music people love enough that it must be enjoyable. But if it weren't the Beatles and it weren't Paul McCartney and it weren't that band playing those tunes, it would probably get pretty old and pretty disinteresting.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that fans of in the Terrapin, Marin, San Francisco scene that kind of are hip to that aspect of it, and because it's the Deadhead mentality.
Well, I want to ask you this. I mean, can you talk? Does Graham or Elliot do they? I mean, one thing that I love about listening to the the early 80s portion of the Grateful Dead specifically is that their tempo would slow down or speed up. They weren't overly obsessed
Right.
with keeping it in this straight metronome
Right.
time.
Right, sure.
How do you guys in Midnight, I mean, it's burning music, but do the cats get uptight about having it to be in the same tempo, or do you guys
Well,
slow?
we're not. I mean, we're one night to the next. We might feel it differently. No one's pulling out a metronome.
Good.
Is what I'd say.
That's good.
No one's pulling out. And occasionally, if there's a debate about something, then occasionally someone will, just because we want to just make sure we're understanding each other. Because that's most things, one preference versus another. But night to night, I mean, we might do. There's a tune we've been doing, Green County, and night to night we might do that within 5 clicks of the same tempo. But there was one on our winter tour. There was one night where we did it where it was sort of where it had been for most of the tour and most of the prior to the tour, and even last fall. It was kind of right where we'd done it. And the next night was a lot slower for no particular reason. It was just, Elliot counts the tune off where she feels it, and it's not a knock on her. She just counted the tune off, and it was noticeably slower. And the shit that happened on that song, after months of doing it at approximately the same tempo, was really cool. And
It's really that's
and
what
it got into a whole space. And it actually, we weren't getting totally out there. We weren't trying these outrageous things. Graham at the big coda, another example, one I used to play guitar on, and then I'm playing keyboard on now. So Graham on the big coda at the end is playing a big ripping lead line, and at that slower tempo, I was, got eyes with Connor across the stage, and I just put one hand on the low end of the synthesizer and one hand on the organ, and was just playing big, huge whole notes, because it was this heavy thing, and it was like the cool choice at that moment was to do so much less, because it wasn't this sort of ruckus, swingy thing that ends up in this big halftime, which is what the tune normally does, but it's just gotten to this heavy kind of space. And it was really cool, and we got off stage, and I was like, yeah, man, that was a little low energy tonight, I don't know, and we listened to a recording the next day, and we went, holy shit!
That is so beautiful.
I mean, that's just how
because that's always the way it works.
Oh, yeah.
People want you to. Could you demonstrate? I mean, you put that rig together. Can you play a tune on the B3?
Sure. Little weird history of this instrument. This is a hybrid of several organs. The manuals.
It's a blend.
Right. This is a blend.
Yeah.
We were near wine country.
That's right.
The keyboards themselves are from a 60s organ that spent a lot of time at the Monterey Jazz Festival. You can see this was a backline instrument at the Monterey
Unbelievable.
Jazz. And at the time, it was, if you ever see pictures, it was a blue organ. There was a big blue B3, and this came out of there.
Psychedelicized.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Play what your heart desires.
Yeah.
All right. Alex Jordan on the Jake Feinberg Show, having a ball.
All right. Let's think of a good one here. My boo I'll be okay. Oh, I know I'll be But it's painful admitting that you're lonely, and it's lonelier admitting you're in pain. Well, my body's broken down, my spirit's leaving town, so I know I'll be okay. Oh, I know I'll be okay. I'm singing la 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 la. Whoa. Oh, I'm singing la 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 la. Whoa. Oh, I know I'll be okay. Oh, I know I'll be okay. Oh, I know I'll be okay. Oh, I know I'll be okay.
Well, I mean, you could probably do a solo performance and just keep people invigorated for a long time. What is the biggest drag about the biz in your mind, like the music biz? I noticed that you're on tour, like you guys have gigs, you're playing festivals, but I mean, it's kind of what's the biggest drag about the biz in your mind?
Well, the biggest drag about the biz is the biz. I mean, it's just
it's just because there's an expectation of slickness and formula.
No, I mean, like, we hold ourselves to a standard, so we want the music to be appealing to people, and the monetary value of appealing music is directly related to what people want. And so you can fool yourself that it isn't, and you can spend a lot of time doing things that nobody wants to hear and say that it's art, and it is, but your value is directly related to what people want to see and watch and,
Absolutely.
and listen to and move to. And the drag about that is that it doesn't allow you to always do what you want to do. And even within the context of the band, I've been playing increasingly more keyboard, and I like playing keyboard, so that's okay. But there was not just to pull within the band to sort of simplify and get less Guitar-mageddon going and more of a band, ensemble with a keyboard texture. But also it's interesting to people that to have a keyboard player, and it's more interesting than 3 guitar players, and so
especially wanking 3 guitar.
Right,
what I'm saying, you have 2 really good, solid.
One solid.
But I mean, in a studio, you feel inhibited because you have to make songs for radio play. I mean, how does that?
Well, I don't think Midnight North. We don't really approach it strictly that way. Our last record, we sort of said, okay, let's cut out all of the long instrumentals. Let's make it as tight as possible. Let's let the songs be the songs. And I don't know if it was about radio play as much as it was about getting more songs on the record and letting the songs speak for themselves.
I dig.
And I think that we've gotten some independent radio play from this last record, Under the Lights, and I wouldn't say that it's because the songs are somewhat formulaic. I don't think that we've approached it. I know that in my own writing, I'm thinking about structure. And I know you have to think about structure to be a songwriter, but I'm thinking about structure in the context of how long is it? Where are the peaks in relation to everything else? And I'm sort of heavily influenced by pop that way, where I'm going to look at what happens in a 3.5 minute song, and where the interesting things are, and what the conventions are. And you can't. I mean, as I mentioned with with like EDM kind of stuff and just real.
Yeah, you were doing that last night.
Right. So it's like I've a little thing.
Are you listening for hooks in those songs?
Yeah, and hooks and contour, and it's the journey, right? Because a good song can feel incredible. Can feel like it's way too short because you want to hear it 1,000 times, or it can feel like you're inside of this song for days and days and days. And in reality, it's this 2.5, 3.5 minute blip that comes on the radio that half the time is edited the hell out of when you hear it in a live setting. Like if you were to go to a club and listen to electronic music, it's being spliced together with other songs. And so, what's the contour then of the song? What makes it interesting? What are the parts that people gravitate to? And you have to listen to all kinds of music in order to stay contemporary, if you will. But I think that as far as tailoring something for a format, a formula, to a point, I think to a point we look at what is appealing across all genres, in contemporary light, and then another point you go, well, this is what the song wants, and this is what we want for the song.
That's what I wanted to talk to you, because I mean, to me, Lee Morgan or a cat that you listen to is Miles Davis.
Sure.
I mean, Miles gets a rap where it's like, he turned his back on the audience. People got offended by that. But I think those guys, for a while, they were so burning. They loved what they were playing. Right. I get the feeling that you guys love what you're playing.
Right.
And they said that, what? For the audience, they said, we really dig what we're playing. And we hope you dig what we're playing.
Right.
But even if you don't, we're still going to play.
Right. That's sort of...
And how do you... It's a fine line between, you want people to get off. You want people to have fun. But you also want to say what you need to say and be authentic. And it's a tough balancing. You feel like you guys have outside of Terrapin Crossroads when you're on the road. Do you think you're playing enough live?
I don't know.
Candidly,
Yeah, I don't know, man. Because it ebbs and flows. Sometimes we might come off of a tour and go, man, we need to get right back out. Like, we're on to something. We need to keep doing.
Right.
And other times you get off a tour and you go, I'm ready to take a rest on it, because you don't want to go up there and feel uninspired because that's a shitty experience personally, and you don't want to go up there and feel like you're uninspired by what your bandmates are doing, because that's not a positive experience for you as a band member. And then you especially, most importantly, don't want to go up and feel like you're putting on a lackluster show for an audience. And any way you slice it, a performance is a performance. I mean, the criticism of Miles turning his back on the audience is somewhat indicative of the time, where people felt entitled to Miles' attention and Miles' performance, and that there's a lot of that, because the other music that was going on in that era was very much performance driven.
Right. He actually would say, it was more about, he didn't want to focus on somebody smiling or distracting him.
He wanted to focus on the music.
Exactly.
That's why he was doing it, and I think that our fan base is giving and forgiving enough that they're not worried about whether we're super showy. I know that some of us can get animated on a given night, and I mean, Graham is such a great indicator of the overall energy,
the pulse,
the pulse of the band and the pulse of the room. I mean, Graham can really light up if something's happening, and just do something where I'm kind of like, hey man, whatever you want to do, I will be behind you on it, and other nights I'm sitting there and going, come on man, there's like 25 people, I know it's only 25, but they paid to be here, we gotta fucking do it, it's like, and it's not a criticism.
No, that's an old school mentality, whether it's 3 or 30,000, you gotta cook.
Right, I'm not criticizing him or anyone else, I'm just saying it's an interesting, it's a thing where we're responsible for the music, right, and so the performance. So I can get wrapped up, I guess is what I'm saying, is that I can get wrapped up in making sure the audience is stimulated by how we look and how we're moving up there. But I think that the bottom line, and referencing what I said earlier about that one performance at Greene County that I thought was sort of mellow and lackluster that in actuality was just huge and powerful and cool. That our experience on the stage, in terms of how we feel, doesn't ultimately matter, and what we're the overall experience, not just musically, but within the room and within the night. If it's a Wednesday night in Bozeman, and it's a sold out show, and we're like everyone's losing their mind, or it's a Friday night in somewhere where you'd expect to have a slammed audience and there's no one there. It really doesn't matter so long as the actual music is delivered, and delivered with the level of execution you want to deliver it at. And what I look like and whether I'm facing the audience ceases to matter. I mean, it doesn't really. I mean, it really doesn't matter at all. But we can get wrapped up in that.
Well, and I think that our generation. I mean, I'm a Gen Xer. You're younger than, I think, probably younger than that. But
right.
I think we are a little bit more in our heads.
Well, there's also cameras everywhere now.
It's very different. Well, it also can be a demoralizing thing if you're burning and people are just talking loud or staring at their phones.
Right.
But the question is this: collectively as a group, in order for you to have a conversation, collectively raise the consciousness level of the audience, you guys have to be in that space to begin with.
Right.
And I just wonder, even when you're playing to 3 people, Alex Jordan, you don't have to speak for anybody else. If you're just thinking about, if you're not going into a gig and you're not in the great frame of mind, but you want to reach people, how do you get yourself into that zone?
It's hard. If you're stepping on the stage and you're already defeated by the day, it's hard to
defeated by the day. That could be a tune right there.
Yeah, good point.
But yeah, no, it's hard to.
It's really hard, and so how do I get myself in? I don't know. Usually, and this is why I don't choose to play solo. Pretty much at all.
It would be great to do a B3 drums, by the way, duo.
That's
the lost art.
We'll have to touch on that. Lee Michaels is a big influence.
Oh yeah, Frosty the drummer is so sick.
That's cool. So anyway, but I remember on this last winter tour, I was just having an off day and an off night, and I was just on stage, just not really particularly being thrilled about being there. And the audience never notices how heavy that is. They always think, man, that was a great job.
Right, they're not in your head.
Right, and so it feels bigger and looks worse internally than it actually is. And so I just remember I was just sort of like, oh man. And I looked over, and Elliot was looking at me, and she must have been staring at me for at least a few seconds before waiting for me to look up. And I looked over and looked at her, and she just smiled, and just smiled. And I just smiled back and immediately felt better. And it was just, and I mentioned it to her after the gig, but it was just the whole thing of your bandmates kind of picking you up, and it's not just musically, not just emotionally, but just kind of you're in that space and we're all in it together, and that doesn't necessarily happen every night. Sometimes we're all up there struggling, and that's very human, and
but like you said in the kitchen before, truthfully, you could have 17 clunkers, but if you cook one night, it makes it all worth it.
Right.
But there is a mental thing that goes on that I think people miss out on in the audience, that you guys are just human beings too.
I think it's really easy, and it's we can see it. We meet all kinds of people and all kinds of musicians, and some of our musician friends are in varying states of their careers, and the people that have sort of already achieved some sort of high level of success, there's a definite theme where people talk to them differently than I think they would normally be spoken to, just because there's this image, and you can see this even on a small level, just out of any environment, you can see it develop within a community where the audience has an image of what the performer is and isn't, and they speak to the performer, and they're speaking to their image, they're speaking to their perception, and they're not speaking to the
perception is the key word,
right? And they're not speaking to the person in front of them, that's a weird thing, because as a performer, what am I obligated to do? Because I'm not going to bring every single thing I am or am not onto a stage, because that's a little too much, right? I mean, it's like if I'm having a totally shitty night, and I've just I've just had an awful relationship breakup, and my dog died, and I haven't eaten today, and and I'm hungover, and whatever it is, I can't bring all that onto the stage. I can't bring those things on the stage. I can bring something out of that energy. I can create, I can funnel that as best I can into something musical and something music emotional. Kind of that line. But the audience member doesn't care if my girlfriend broke up with me. They don't care if my dog died. They don't care if I'm hungry or hungover. They don't care about any of that. They care about the performance on the stage. And then you meet them after the show, and let's say you had a lights out performance, and it was just no matter all that stuff that went on, you just crushed it. The band comes off the stage, and we don't even want to be there.
Right.
And the audience is like, oh man, that was the most incredible thing. How did you do this?
Yeah.
And they're just talking to you, and you can't be the person you want to be in that moment. You have to be on, as people say, and
well, but also it's not really. I think it takes a long time. John Perry Barlow, rest in peace. I did a couple interviews with him, and he said, it took him a long time. People would come up and ask him, what this song meant to them, and he just said, for so long it irked him. But then he said, it's not my business what it means to other. It can mean whatever it wants. Right. So, I mean, I can't imagine. It's kind of all you want to say is when somebody's like, "Man, you guys were cooking," and it was kind of flat, or you thought it was, and all you want to say is, "Dude, I really it was not that fun." But you can't. It's not your. It's really not. Right. It's not your business.
Well, but it's also not your experience. The person is coming up to you and telling you what they experience, and you can't sit there and tell them, your experience wasn't real. My experience.
It's the experience of relativity.
Right. but that is so it. So someone came up and said, "Hey man, you guys crushed it. Oh my God, you did this organ thing," or "Oh Graham, you did this thing and you did this whatever it is." And you go, "Thanks, man. Gosh, that was a lot of fun." And maybe sometimes it's a little bit. You have to just phone it a little bit in because you don't have the energy. And I hate to say that because it's not. I don't want an audience member to feel like, oh well, that fucking Alex Jordan, man.
What a dick.
Right, what a dick. But I want the audience to have their best possible experience in a situation, and I want to facilitate that because if I'm going to a show, I don't care about any of those things. However the person's feeling, I care about the experience of the show. From the moment I walk in the door to the moment I start my car at the end of the night. I want that all to be the experience I've either paid for, or if it's it's not even about money at that point. It's just about the experience of the show, and the experience of going out to dance with people, and the experience of seeing live music, and the extension of myself as a performer that I bring on, and I use that sort of ambiguously, but the extension of the person I am that goes on stage, right? It's not contrived. It's not me. It's just an aspect of myself that I'm willing to put out there and risk, because it's not the person who's hungry or depressed or angry. It's the person who loves playing music and particularly loves sharing that love with an audience that wants to listen, and the passion of listening and the passion of dancing meets the passion of performing, and that creates something. That creates the experience, and that experience is what people are there for. That's what they're there for, and that's what I'm there for. And if I'm having a hard night seeing that, or they're having a hard night enjoying that, that doesn't matter. So wherever we meet, however much we meet, is what matters. And so I think
I was just thinking you could also say, easier said than done, but you could say, you could just be honest and say, someone could be giving you all sorts of compliments, and you could say, but it was a struggle tonight. But you could be honest.
I've done that. Someone was telling the band, "Oh man, you really were on." And said, "Yeah, man, this is like we're had a rough day." Or,
it's a slog tonight. Yeah,
it wasn't easy, but I'm so glad you said something because it makes me feel better about it. I've said that too, and it depends on depends on the audience.
Absolutely. No, before we wrap, I just want to go back. It sort of ties into the business component of it. Is that spiritual music is unquantifiable, okay? And we live in a quantitative time, a data-driven time, a number-crunching time. What do you say to club owners, promoters, people that bring in music? And because you have a situation now, and you guys might have experienced it before, you got to pay to play. You can play for the door. All of a sudden, if you can't quantify something, how are you supposed to determine what you're worth? And so what's your message to cats out there who are bringing in spiritual music. And what do you say about? I mean, I guess the larger overarching point is a musician should be a profession. It shouldn't be your gift to society, to the world.
Right. I think there's a growing culture of appreciation for what musicians do, and we've gone from being thrilled about making $300 between us. Heck, I think we've gone from being thrilled to make less than that.
That's great bread.
Right. I mean, it's but
it's bread, man.
Right, but like at a certain time, here you drove 400 miles, and here's $250, and you're like, okay, cool, man, thanks. It's like we've gone from that, to the point that it's sort of we're able to sustain ourselves. But every step along the way, this has been what I'm about to say has been consistent, which is that the club owner, the audience member, and the band and the crew, if they all have a positive experience, they are infinitely more likely to bring you back. And the club owner might have a positive experience because of ticket sales, or the club owner might have a positive experience because they just thought you were a great act.
You fucking played your asses off.
Right, and you might come in and a club, and an owner is going to go, I don't know, it's a lot of money to give you guys, let's just maybe try a little less, and let's try like a Tuesday, because they don't want to risk their big end of the week, and they don't want to risk a bunch of money, and they don't want to staff additional bar people. And you come in and you play and you're great, because that's your job, is to get on stage and deliver. And you play and you're great and you do the best you possibly can for the 25 people that are there. And maybe they didn't promote, and that's why there's 25 people there. But the club owner comes off and says, hey man, you guys rock, you guys are great, you guys are so enjoyable, let's get you back here on a Thursday, let's get you back here on a Saturday night, let's get you back here, whatever it is. And they're saying that because they're going, okay, now I see it. Now I see what these people can do. Now I see the potential for this, and I want to be one of the guys or gals that brings audience members to.
Oh, I dig, man. You're nailing it. You're nailing it.
And that's
but there's a proving ground.
Right. But you have to. That hasn't changed about the music industry. You do have to pay your dues, and you do have to kind of do that. And I think that you have to love it through all of that if you want to do it professionally, because that the discouraging thing is, okay, you've spent, especially like. I know a lot of my friends from college that we all studied classical music and classical singing went off and said, okay, I'm going to be an opera singer. And they go to sing they audition for a role, and they get the role, and they get the dollar amount that's not what they thought they were going to get for doing the role, and they get, and it's, oh, by the way, it's a double cast, so you're not even going to get to every show, and it's all these things. And if your attitude at that moment is, well, this isn't what I want to do, then you're right, that isn't what you want to do. Because you don't make music, you want to make money doing music. And that's a thing that can happen, and you can make that happen by creating music that delivers the type of experience that demands audience and demands money and demands that exchange. That can be something that everyone's cool and kosher with. You can create that, but that's not why you start, and it can't be, because if that is, then everything you deliver after that point is going to be but I need to make this, but I need to do that, but my experience, you're going to be measuring your experience by how successful you were on paper, and not how successful you were.
You're not. That's not a long-term salvation. No. That's not love, devotion, surrender.
But it's the same struggle either way. You have to start and pay your dues, as everyone says, and you have to love it and want to do it, and not be on stage thinking about how much money you are or aren't making. And once you get to the point where you're polished enough, and it's your responsibility, like I said, it's your responsibility to, as a band and an artist or whatever it is, to deliver, to have your product, your performance together. And you bring that, and if it's good, and if it's enjoyable, and if it delivers the experience people want, then it will beget more opportunities.
The 58, let's finish with a tune. Sure. Alex Jordan, part of Midnight North. You got your own band, Alex Jordan Band.
Yeah, working on a record right now.
It's been an absolute honor to connect with you, brother. Graham Lesh, Elliot Peck, you found a good cat here.
The greatest sin I have to hold, getting what I've wanted by ways and means both honest and untrue. It's not I take my great transgressions outside to be flaunted, but a lie's a lie, and I know that's true, true to you. Well, mark me, said the king to his soldiers, if I tell this lie over and over, the eldest here among us may regret. There's little to recall or to collect. There's a time for tact and a time for talk, a time for telling tales when negotiations fail for common ground. The little lies we tell to keep the wind up in our sails are the ballast in the bilges, and we're slowly sinking down. Well, mark me, said the king to his soldiers, I tell this lie over and over, the eldest here among us may regret. When help me, said the fisherman, this fishing tail's gotten out of my hand, soon I'll trade the truth out for regret. There's little to recall or to respect. We can't win if the game is fixed for losing. It's a sin to get ahead and get around. Don't you know there's a beauty in deception? You leave it to perception, shove it underground. Well, mark me, said the king to his soldiers, I tell this lie over and over, the eldest here among us may neglect. When help me, said the fisherman, this fishing tail's gotten out of my hand, soon I'll trade the truth out for regret. There's little to recall, there's little to regret, there's little to recall or to respect.
Alex Jordan, going strong. Keep it happening, my man. Thank you for being part of the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks for having me, man.
We'll be back in a little bit. Everybody hang loose.